House lawmakers expected to debate and vote on a war powers resolution today, despite signs of de-escalation between the U.S. and Iran. My next guest will manage the Republican response on the floor to the Democrat-backed measure. Texas Congressman Michael Burgess serves on the House Rules Committee and joins us now. Congressman, great to have you here this morning. It will be a big day as we look on at this. But first, can you just tell us, what do we need to know about the War Powers Act? What are war powers?
Well, the War Powers Act actually goes back to the early 1970s, and it was a way to attempt to circumscribe the power of the president. The things that had happened in Korea and Vietnam at the early days of the Nixon administration, Congress was attempting to reassert some of its authority. I got no quarrel with that, and in fact, in the Rules Committee last night, we did review some of the principles in the War Powers Act. You know, I think one of the things, I can't obviously talk about what I heard in the briefing yesterday afternoon. What I heard in the committee last night from committee Democrats was the issue that the authorization that the administration seeks to use is the Iraq War resolution from 2002. Now, I wasn't here when that resolution passed. Actually, there were 3 Democrats in the room last night who were here when that resolution passed. If we want to go back and argue, is it time to sunset the 2002 war authorization for use of military force? Okay, I think that's a reasonable argument to have. But you have a president who is making decisions based upon what the safety and security of the United States of America, and now they want to circumscribe that authority. We shouldn't be talking about how we're going to limit our president. We should be talking about how we're going to support the individual who's protecting our country.
But to go back to your earlier point, Congressman, this is nothing new. We have seen so many times in the past opposing parties take on sitting presidents over their war powers and trying to limit those. Obama in 2011 in the Libya conflict, Clinton 1993, the Somalia mission, Bush 41 in 1990 with the Gulf War, and Reagan, his Lebanon policy in 1983. So why does this have such an uncertain history, and why is it not more clearly defined?
That's probably the question of the hour, but uncertain is the operable word here. I think what I should say in this situation is it's perfectly legitimate for Congress to have the argument over the war powers, but at the same time, under Article 2 of the Constitution, the president does have the authority to do what is necessary to protect the nation. Then does need to come back and talk to the Congress about what has happened and why. And if there's further authorization needed, Congress can have that debate and have that vote. Look, a lot of the anxiety, and I've certainly seen this not just in this administration, but in the last administration, a lot of the anxiety is the authorizations for use of military force were passed in 2001 and 2002. Most of us were not here when those authorizations were passed, and they seem to continue in perpetuity. Now, if that's a problem, then that's a problem that Congress should fix. We shouldn't be quarreling with the president about that. That's our obligation to fix. You know, I was upset when President Obama went into Libya. He didn't notify us. He kind of gave a brief press conference while he was boarding a plane for Brazil. I thought that was wrong. I thought that was handled inappropriately. There was never the requirement that Congress put on the president to come back and explain yourself, and as a consequence, we have even continued unrest in that country because of the actions that were taken by the administration then. I wasn't here in Somalia, I wasn't here in Kosovo, but this is one of the most important and consequential votes that a member of Congress can make. And the fact that we haven't had a secondary authorization for years and years is perhaps of some concern. But this isn't even a real authorization, because what it says when you read the context of the joint resolution, it's that the president may not continue the war in Iran. There is no war in Iran right now, right? Unless I missed something in the headlines today.
The vote's clearly taking place at a time when it could be described as a de-escalating situation that could change at any moment, obviously, which makes this even more important. But when it comes to members of Congress,
the president did de-escalate. I mean, the president. You know, look, for the 24 hours between Tuesday night and Wednesday night, I thought things looked pretty dire, and I think the president handled it with just the right measure and then spoke to the nation with just the right tone.
But at the crux of the debate to take out Soleimani was the imminent nature of that. Members of Congress, some, before they speculated, did hold out to be briefed on that. That happened yesterday. I want to get your takeaway from that briefing, but first, here's Senator Mike Lee.
Sure.
Probably the worst briefing I've seen, at least on a military issue, in the 9 years I've served in the United States Senate. One of the messages we received from the briefers was, do not debate, do not discuss the issue of the appropriateness of further military intervention against Iran. And that if you do, you'll be emboldening Iran. I find this insulting and demeaning.
So what was your takeaway from that briefing, Congressman?
Well, first off, Senator Lee and I had different briefings. They briefed the House, and then they went over and briefed the Senate. So I can't speak to anything that Senator Lee heard in his briefing, and really I'm obligated not to talk about what happened in our briefing, but I came away from that briefing completely confident that the actions taken by the administration in regards to General Soleimani were absolutely appropriate and correct. And you know what? I think back to the mid-1990s. I'm just a regular guy. Clinton apparently had the opportunity to take out bin Laden, and we learned later that he didn't. And look at the consequences we suffered because the administration faltered. We have an administration who's willing to take decisive action, make the consequences, minimize the consequences, but take decisive action when it's required. And you got to respect that.
All right, Congressman, a big vote happening today. We will be watching all of that. Thank you for your time this morning.